All right, everyone. I fondly remember a couple of years ago when Donald Trump supposedly was going to lead to the next Great Depression in the United States and that his trade wars couldn't work and he was out of his league dealing with China or even Latvia for that matter or Uganda, and that he was just all around a terrible person. And now you see the first little cracks beginning to appear in the legacy media's wall of propaganda about this because they can't keep up the facade. The economy of the United States is doing well enough that it's impossible for them to actually construe it as going wrong. And the trade deals that we're hammering out with China have generally been going well to the point where it looks like there might be light at the end of the tunnel finally. Looks like there are going to be tariff reductions on some raw U.S. goods, soybeans, pork, and so forth. U.S. will agree to certain tariff reductions on Chinese goods. So the preliminary stage is now beginning to end, which I think is quite good. China's economy, meanwhile, because of tariffs and because of what I've spoken of for years, which is the structure of their economy being piss poor, has begun to slow down. The problem for China is this, and they know it, which is why they're trying to wrap up a trade deal. I don't even think that they're trying to stall at this point. I think they're terrified. Here's why. The Chinese economy is based on exporting cheap goods. In order for them to be able to do that, and it's primarily to the United States, in order for that to happen, the U.S. has to have enough purchasing power. If the U.S. actually ends up in a slump, it affects China disproportionately. But if China ends up in a slump, does that affect the ability of them to manufacture things for a penny per 100 units? Or your U.S. manufacturers' ability to switch to getting their goods potentially from India or Thailand or some other less expensive country if necessary? No. It doesn't affect the U.S. hardly at all. If we take a hit, it's a minor one. And any hit we do take is amplified and sent back to China. So they're afraid that Trump is going to rock the boat too much and actually upend the U.S. economy because it'll upend theirs in the process. China's an exporter. The U.S. is an importer. The U.S. makes more refined goods with imported materials. Now, this form of economic globalism has its own negative impacts, especially on U.S. workers. It drives wages down. It doesn't really drive the cost of goods down. The neocon proposal of yesteryear was that if U.S. firms could re-import foreign goods at very cheap levels, they could make cheaper products, and so even if U.S. wages fell, it didn't matter too much because people had access to cheap shit. This has caused nothing but abuse and tankering by the Chinese government. It has caused nothing but non-stop trade and currency manipulation, non-stop bad trade deals that involve China tariffing our goods without anything being applied in reverse. And Trump is the first leader to have the balls to realize this is a problem and can be solved. His goal, and he's been working at this since day one of office, has been to incrementally reduce the abuse of foreign nations by tampering with trade deals and by making big asks so that if you get a 5% reduction here and a 20% reduction there, and you keep doing that for long enough, eventually you've eroded 10 or 20 years of shitty progress in the wrong direction without even having to do anything particularly strenuous. But the ultimate goal is China. We do a huge amount of trade with China. At first it was the USMCA. That's been passed. The USMCA is ready to go. It's just that the Democrats in the House refuse to sign it because they don't want to give Trump a major victory before Election Day. I have no doubt, by the way, that the Democrats will largely vote in favor of it if Trump is reelected. Good reason to vote for Trump. Dude, we do more trade with Mexico and Canada than we do with China anyway. China's now third trade partner. But we're their largest trade partner by a long sea mile, so keep that in mind. As far as China goes, it's a major trading partner. Having tied up Canada and Mexico already with an agreement that's literally ready to be penned inked tomorrow, as long as Nancy Pelosi can get her head out of her ass, the only thing left to do is China. Of course, the problem being any final deal there will probably have to go through Congress as well. It's shitty, because the same constraints on government that can prevent tyranny can also promulgate it if you've already got it. I'm beginning to notice a little bit of an issue there that could plague our republic for some time to come. Hopefully the judiciary eventually gets involved and does what is right. Of course, it usually takes them 20 or 30 years to do that, so we'll be waiting for a long time. I'll be half a step from the grave by the time SCOTUS actually puts the genie back in the bottle with regards to these things. What I would say is this. I expect Trump to do well with the Chinese trade deal. It doesn't matter if it's a complete improvement. It doesn't matter if you have a zero tariff situation. It matters that you have a better situation. It would be impossible for it to be worse for the United States. The U.S. is being abused up the ass. So any reduction of that abuse is a benefit to our economy. There is a reason that we're having sustained growth of wages, of GDP, low unemployment, stock market rising, and consumer confidence up the ass right now. It's because Trump is in there. If Trump, by the way, fails to win re-election, let's say your next president is Sanders or Warren, yes, it will cause an economic downturn. Maybe not a collapse, probably, at first. You'll still be running on the fumes of the Trump presidency's pro-growth policies, but eventually it will have a downturn. It'd be quite interesting. The Democrats would cause it, but I guarantee I know exactly what they do because they've done it before. In order to piss away all that capitalistic prosperity that's been generated, they'll continue to engage in pumping the economy full of funny money in order to keep it afloat long enough so that the next presidency, a Republican, will have the collapse. And that would have happened to Trump, by the way, except he kept pumping. He realizes, hey, nobody's going to care about this debt shit anyway because it's old hat, number one. Number two, it's still manageable. Number three, it's largely internal. I'm just going to keep the pump going and force the Fed to lower interest rates. Yeah, I'm just going to keep the charade going. He did what Bush didn't do. Bush tried to throttle that back and collapse the economy because the economy was being held up by the Clinton tax and spend policies. Reagan was the last one that kind of understood economics, and even he wasn't necessarily a genius. Trump is, though. Trump realizes that if he can sustain that growth for long enough, number one, no downturn impacts his presidency. Number two, he can heal the damage done by globalism in hopes of growing the economy enough to keep a pace with that printed funny money, and eventually you can throttle it off and the U.S. economy will be flying on its own. It won't need any help. That's what he understands. This is something that I guess Krugman doesn't understand, or rather would comprehend, but he opposes it on principle because he's a communist. Which he is. Some of these people, let's just call them what they are. They're fucking commies. They're fucking red. They're fucking Soviet lovers. They're tankies or whatever. We know what they are. They can use the term socialist or bleeding heart social democrat. And now, you're a communist, dude. You explicitly push for every form of redistributionism known to man, every form of centrality and hyper-regulationism. Is there some point, some tipping point at which you can say that is fundamentally more close to a Stalin than it has anything to do with the socialists of yesteryear, some labor movement or whatever? Absolutely. You don't even like unions anymore, dude. The idea of a non-government-based union is like anathema to these people. They don't even... Bernie Sanders is like, fuck the private sector unions. Fuck you and your union healthcare. No, you're going to have government centralized healthcare. By the way, this won't spook any voters within the Rust Belt whatsoever if he becomes the nominee. Nominate Bernie Sanders, Democrats. Please fucking do. I can't wait to see him get eviscerated. Which is exactly what would happen to a dude who's pushing 80 years old, just had a heart attack, has used the term socialist for the last half century. These people consider him electable. Okay, test that hypothesis. Fucking vote for Bernie Sanders. Absolutely. I have no finger on the pulse of Sanders being a Vermonter, by the way. That's about all. Peace out.